Hey everyone, hope you're good. Hope you guys doing okay. As usual, thank you so much for joining me today. So to start with, as I described it in the video description, obviously, I was wondering, how do you define self-actualization for yourself? So maybe we could start brainstorming some ideas first in the chat box. What does self-actualization mean to you? And as I'm waiting for your messages, I will give you some ideas from psychology, because there are quite a few perspectives on self-actualization. It's not just it's not just this idea of kind of actualizing our potential or becoming the best version of ourselves, but there's way more to that. So self-actualization, essentially, originally described, and that was before humanistic psychology, has been defined as this kind of drive for autonomy, separation from the environment, development, and growth. So kind of becoming the best version of ourselves in a way, or the best version we could be. Not by standards of other people, not by standards of like psychology books or science, whatever you might want to call it, but based on our own capabilities and skills. So it was, if you want to research it more, it was a German or Austrian, I think it was German psychiatrist called Kurt Goldstein, who first developed this term of self-actualization. And he described actually self-actualization as not just limited to people, but actually every single organism on Earth, maybe outside of Earth as well, who knows, having this drive to kind of become the best version of themselves and utilize all possible skills and capabilities in life. So in from this perspective, it's like people are actualizing themselves, plants are actualizing themselves, animals actualizing themselves. So basically the whole goal of this process is to live life to the best of our ability. We have an idea in the chat box, finding a purpose in life. Yes, so self-actualization could be also about finding this purpose in life as we actualize the skills or potentials that we are having. Now, with the development of humanistic psychology, so Abraham Maslow, then Carl Rogers, self-actualization became more like motivation. So it's not like we might be having this idea that self-actualization leads us to a specific goal or leads us to a specific state of mind or state of being, but essentially Abraham Maslow saw self-actualization as a motivation for growth. So basically it's a never-ending process, and he first started describing self-actualization as an end goal of human development. So he noticed that certain people are already kind of self-actualized as they display the certain characteristics like creativity, being able to be grateful for simple things in life, having these peak experiences and flow in life in general, and being way more open to different ideas and possibilities than so-called average people. And also what he noted at that time was that this so-called self-actualized people were having kind of more accurate perception on themselves and the reality and other people as well. But that was on the beginning, and then as he was further developing his theory of human needs and how we are meeting our needs, how we are motivated to meet them in the first place, that's where I think he started noticing that the self-actualization is actually a kind of never-ending process. And he also added, eventually he added a further stage on this hierarchy of needs. I hope you are familiar with this kind of famous pyramid of a different kind of needs that humans have. So eventually he added this extra stage beyond self-actualization called self-transcendence. So as we can see here, that self-actualization is actually a kind of process, a tendency. And that's what Carl Rogers later on noticed as well. He observed in people this kind of drive or tendency to be healthy, to develop, to live the best life, to find purpose, to find meaning, right? But what is, we could kind of call this tendency a motivation as well. So it's not like self-actualization is some sort of state we have to strive, but rather is this tendency or motivation. And it's an unconscious one as well. It's an automatic one that we are all having within us. So that would be kind of brief introduction to a theory of self-actualization. So I ask you guys, how do you view self-actualization? Because there are many different perspectives and many different interpretations. And I think what's most important is how we view personally, subjectively, self-actualization process in our life. And I'm pretty sure that most people are actually familiar with it, but maybe they didn't know what it is. Maybe they didn't know what is it, this drive that pushes them forward, that pushes them to achieve certain things in life. Like if you ask yourself, let's say you strive towards getting a particular job, right? So you get that job, you get really good pay, for example, you are fairly happy, you're fairly satisfied. But in many situations, actually, we're going to be pushing forward. Why are you pushing towards promotion? Why are you pushing towards a better kind of job, or changing your form of employment into, for example, self-employment, right? Why do you want to change certain things in your life? Why are you even on this live stream, which is essentially on personal development? That's exactly what self-actualization is. It's this motivation to become more, to have more in life, to grow, to develop, to actualize ourselves in a way. I'm not really getting any comments, which is fine, so I'm just gonna keep talking. But you know, my ideas, like in all other live stream, the idea is that the more you kind of participate in the discussion, the more you're gonna get from it, the more opportunity you will get for example, working on your personal goals. So I really invite you to kind of participate in these discussions. If I could, I would have people basically live on my streams, but just doing the best I can. So in a way, from this psychological perspective, as psychology developed over years, we can see here that self-actualization is actually something like a meta-motivation. So it's an all-embracing motivation of everything. So for example, if you're motivated to get some food, if you're motivated to get a new career, if you're motivated to plant a flower in your garden, that could be an expression of self-actualization. I'm saying could be because it could be an expression of something else as well. But from this perspective, self-actualization could be seen as this meta-motivation that drives our action, pushes us forward. So it's like it's this driving tendency to individuate ourselves, to become who we are, who we truly are in a way. But most importantly, it's this kind of tendency to simply live the best life we can have. That would be the total overview. I have all my basic needs taken care of, but now I'm like depressed because I don't know what to do next. We'll talk about it in the live stream. Maslow's pyramid seems to be progressing from id needs to ego needs and then to super ego needs at the top. Maybe. I wouldn't put the super ego at the top, but we'll talk about it as well. So in a way, basically, as we are actualizing ourselves, we become more individuated. So for example, if you're familiar with the theory of Carl Jung, we know the process of individuation is this process of kind of becoming whole and learning more about ourselves as we're going around. So where we kind of create a separation from the environment, but at the same time we are not completely abandoning the environment. So it's more like in a way a process of interdependence. So we interact with the environment. We know that we need environment for many things, and the environment probably needs us as well. But in this process of individuation, which is essentially in a way a process of self-actualization as well, we develop this autonomy, and we learn about clearly defined boundaries between ourselves and the world, or lack of them, depending on which level of the psyche you want to look at. But essentially, in this process of individuation, we become more independent, more autonomous. We have more choice in life. We choose things and values for ourselves. And as we separate ourselves, as we become distinct from the environment, and we learn more about ourselves, different drives, we withdraw all these expectations or projections, and we can see other people more clearly. So that's from this more perspective of individuation, but of course there are many different many overlaps between these two theories, because as a result of this process of self-actualization, you also become more distinct, more autonomous. You make choices for yourself in terms of your own values, in terms of your own, wishes, desires. But most importantly, the core of this drive is the fact that self-actualization, as seen originally by Maslow or Kurt Goldstein, is a need. It's this need for growth, essentially. So when we are motivated to grow, we are motivated to actualize ourselves, right? And at the same time, we are motivated to meet this need to become more, but at the same time true to ourselves. So it's not like we want to change ourselves in the process, although sometimes that might be a byproduct of actualizing ourselves in a way. But it's more about making these choices and that are based on who we are, who we truly are. So sorry, just reading comments. What is the relationship between individuation and enlightenment? So Jung actually saw individuation as kind of different to enlightenment itself. I would say that if anything, enlightenment would be more related to the next stage. If we're talking about like Maslow pyramid of needs, enlightenment would be more about self-transcendence. So it's a state just beyond self-actualization. So basically what happens is that you learn everything you can about yourself, right? You actualize everything you can. You live the best life you want, and then you transcend it all. You let it all go, and basically in this process, you become more and more oriented towards the environment. Even during the self-actualization stage, as you're learning more about yourself, you become more and more progressively more and more oriented towards the environment, but not in the form of dependence, but more in the form of this interdependence, that you want to solve world problems, you want to solve problems of other people, you want to be helpful, you want to participate in the community, and you're more interested in kind of service to other people in a way, not a sacrifice, but service. Again, because you're building this distinction between yourself. So at the core of this whole theory, we know that the whole pyramid of needs, we know that we start on this very basic level of physiological needs, and then things like love for belongings. I can't even remember the whole order, but it doesn't matter. Basically what happens is that there's self-actualization, on the one side, like, I know there's some conflicting information actually in theory, because on the one side, Maslow said that self-actualization depends on the satisfaction of the basic needs. So only if you satisfy all the needs on that pyramid of needs, so you make sure that you're safe, you make sure that you get food, you make sure that you have some relationships with other people, and you met that need for connection and intimacy, only then you can reach this stage of self-actualization. So obviously it would be difficult to, work on your growth when you struggle to put food on the table. But at the same time, as the self-actualization theory has been developing over years, it appears that even when you're working on your safety needs, even when you're working on getting a job or getting money or getting relationships in your life, that could be also an expression of self-actualization. And why is that? The major distinction between self-actualization process or self-actualizing people who are driven by this motivation, by this need, and the average people who don't, is that self-actualizing people see needs, their own needs, as something pleasant to satisfy in a way. So it's essentially when they satisfy needs, they choose to do it for the purpose of feeling good, of having a delightful experiences in their life, for having joy in their life. So they're not pressured by the environment to meet these needs, or by their own bodies in a sense, but they choose to meet these needs as a part of the whole journey. So as I was mentioning before, one of the characteristics of self-actualizing people is this ability to take pleasure in simple things, to be grateful for very simple things. So even when we strive towards basic safety needs, even when we're striving for getting a better job or getting a job at all, that could be still a part of self-actualization process, as you are choosing these things for yourself, in a sense. I know in some circumstances you could obviously argue that it's very difficult. And yeah, that is true. It might be very difficult to make right choices. You might be, kind of very pressured to make these choices very quickly if it's a very difficult situation. But the possibility is still there. There's still possibility for growth, even if you're working on these very basic needs. Whereas in turn, if we take people who are not very growth oriented, who are not self-actualizing, the way they see their needs are basically as kind of a nuisance in their life, as something very irritating, something frustrating, right? So basically their choices in their life, regardless on what level, what stage of the pyramid or the hierarchy of needs they are working on, their choices will be based on deficiency. So what they are not having in their life. That is a lot of pressure, if you ask me, right? And we all been there. So basically, from this perspective, such individuals will be dependent a lot on the environment. So dependent maybe on government, on other people, on friends, on family, to satisfy this super irritating needs, right? Bring me food, I need food, right? Or kind of expecting other people to treat us with respect or give us something. And basically when they satisfy their need, they look for another deficiency in their life. So it's very difficult to feel grateful, right? Or to learn something from such experiences. Is everyone on the journey of self-actualization, whether they consciously realize it or not, and being aware of the process accelerates the process. I think that everyone I think that everyone is on the path of self-actualization. But what happens is, and I was actually going to start talking about it. So what happens is, now is the question, why is not everyone around me actualizing themselves, right? So what happens is that basically in childhood, we learn that certain experiences bring us joy. Certain experiences are good for us. Certain experiences make us feel good. Certain experiences bring us this kind of youthful delight in a way, where we as children we basically engage in these activities for the sole purpose of, because it's good, it's nice, it feels good, right? And then what happens is that that's the theory basically of humanistic psychology. I'm not saying that is set in stone and that is 100% what's happening. It's just something to consider. And then what happens is that we learn that our parents are not accepting certain experiences and they punish us for them. So we want to gain obviously this acceptance of the environment, of our parents, and then later of the society, of our peers. So what happens is that we start to restrict these experiences and these choices. So even if something is aligned with our feelings, in childhood it's very simple, so it has to be just the feeling. Even if something feels right for us, if we are not met with this approval of our parents, for example, and they punish us for us, make us feel guilty or bad about doing certain things or choosing certain things, we're going to start pushing away. We're going to stop engaging in these experiences. So for example, if I play with a particular toy as a child and it's super satisfying for me, I love it, it's the best experience, I completely immerse myself in that play, but then my parents come in, or my mom comes in and saying like, this is a ridiculous toy, it's stupid, why are you doing it? I'm gonna start feeling weird, right? At first weird, that's gonna create some conflict. Then I'm gonna, if it happens again, I'm gonna probably avoid playing with that toy around my parents because I don't want to get that negative reaction. And then essentially I'm gonna abandon this toy altogether so that I stop getting that negative feedback from the environment. So this is a very simple example, but that's how we set ourselves on this path of blocking certain elements of our experiences and essentially certain parts of ourselves because they bring us disapproval from the environment. And then as a result, we switch from orienting ourselves or being motivated, we switch from being motivated to engage in experiences for the sole purpose of joy or delight to choosing experiences that will bring us acceptance and approval from other people. And what happens is that we're going to push away certain parts of our personality up, far away in the unconscious because they don't bring us approval, right? They don't bring us acceptance. They make us feel maybe weird or ashamed or something like that, something along these lines. So as a result, if we fast forward to adulthood, for example, such individual will be choosing things in their life for the purpose of approval and acceptance of other people. So in this context, I don't mean an approval or validation in the narcissistic sense that we're fishing for compliments of other people, but it's more like trying to fit in, not cause too much conflict or controversy around other people. Make sure that we don't get these weird looks from other people. Make sure that someone doesn't criticize us or someone doesn't ridicule what we are doing. So we shape ourselves into this perfect, in a way, human being that doesn't get these negative experiences. But as a result of that, as you see here, we are not very autonomous. We are not making choices based on our own values and what we what feels right for us, what would be good for us. So that would be a kind of overview of why some people can actualize themselves easily and why others not. And it's not like, as I was saying, it's not a very conscious process. It's not like we are fishing for compliments or approval, but essentially it's actually a very natural process as we are going through that whole socialization in childhood. That self-actualization necessarily move people from materialism to spiritualism. I would say that depends on the person. Some people are more material oriented, some more grounded in the reality, others not. You can find self-actualization probably in both, but with self-actualization process you become more open-minded. You definitely become more capable of abstracting different ideas. So it's not like you if you never were interested in God or religion, you suddenly start praying, although that might be the case for some people, which is fine, right? That is their experience. But it's more like you become more flexible, more adaptable. Spirituality might be a part of it, but I personally wouldn't say that is like always the case. It might be for some people more than for others. Ego backlash, in a sense, yeah. So I remember someone wrote some comment about super ego before. So from this perspective, you could say that most people are very driven by their super ego throughout their lives. And with self-actualization, you actually become more free from it. So we know super ego is like lots of rules. You should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And for some people, it can be it's a little bit like slavery, because if you don't do like the super ego tells you to do, you're gonna start feeling like guilt or shame. You're not gonna be accepting yourself a lot. So I would say that with self-actualization process, you become more free as you are choosing your own values, what is right for you, what is right for your environment, immediate environment, what is right for life in general, right? So just to briefly say, I would imagine that there could be some misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the self-actualization process, where maybe some of us could be thinking that self-actualization process is about becoming very self-centered, narcissistic, egotistic, where we only focus on ourselves. But as I was saying before, actually, as a result of this process, you become more environment oriented, more conscious of yourself and the environment and other people. I would say that maybe for some people, there might be a stage on their path, on their growth, where they need to be a little bit more narcissistic than usual or more self-centered than usual. And it's part of their learning. Maybe that's what they need to do in order to disentangle themselves, for example, from the superego, from all this pressure to conform to the society. But as we are growing, I don't think it should be like a permanent stage, ideally. Because if you do become completely self-centered, narcissistic, that's not self-actualization, because self-actualization is about expansion. You can't expand when you are focused only on yourself. So then you might say, why we are not self-actualizing. So as I was saying, most people, the major problem, the major obstacle is this kind of symbiotic relationship with the society. Symbiotic, which isn't entirely good for either of the side, maybe for the government or for the society itself, in certain contexts actually. But essentially what is happening is that we become driven by fear of breaking social rules, fear of not being accepted, fear of being rejected, and maybe even fear of being by ourselves, on our own, basically. So we are driven by this fear because obviously if we break the rule, if we do something that is not compatible with people's values, essentially, we're going to get this disapproval, right? And that's what we fear the most. That's what we've been conditioned to fear in a way. So essentially we start avoiding questioning anything, or we avoid kind of looking inwards, learning more about ourselves. And it is a valid fear because, you know, nobody wants to be completely alone, or we might associate it with maybe a threat to our survival if we stay by ourselves, or if we are met with a huge group of people with disapproving looks, or kind of criticizing comments. It could be very threatening to our survival in a sense. So the fear is valid, but it is a question of kind of, do we want to stay in that safety, or do we want to grow? Do we want to keep getting kind of false acceptance from other people because we are not fully whole, as we repress different true, authentic parts of our personality? Or do we choose this growth and development, which is kind of risky because, yes, we might be met with disapproval. Yes, we might be met with social rejection. But at the same time, there is also this potential for greater rewards, because self-actualization, as I was saying, is this greater expansion and better being more flexible, more adaptable, right? So actually, we could trick ourselves in terms of that fear of not being accepted or being rejected, or being completely ridiculed by other people, by saying that perhaps if I grow, if I develop, but only as this authentic human being, maybe I could get even more self-acceptance. It's not really a motivating force for self-actualizing people, but I think it's an interesting approach if you want to start negotiating with that fear. Right, exactly. Fear and go out of your comfort zone. I'm not with Arthur, no. Absolutely no. So I started using this term of kind of being authentic and true to ourselves. And from the perspective of Carl Rogers, he emphasized this necessity to harmonize different parts of ourselves into a coherent whole, in a way where we develop our authenticity, where we develop our ability to stay true within ourselves. So, for example, if I don't like someone, right, I might avoid their phone calls, right? Or I might avoid replying to their messages, right? That tells me something, that maybe I don't like that person. But because I'm afraid of losing someone, or because I'm afraid of rejection, I'm going to keep, occasionally texting them, or occasionally replying to their phone call. So what happens is that in such situation, I'm not staying true to myself. I fear of doing something about my discomfort, and I fear of being rejected. That's just one out of many, many different examples. But basically what happens is, what the goal, in a way, with self-actualization needs to be, is that we need to be super honest with ourselves. And only then, when there is a harmony between our thoughts, between our feelings, between our behavior, most importantly, between who we are, who we really are, so what we think, what we feel, and who we think we are, only then we can kind of progress on this journey. But if we kind of flip it around, the very fact of striving towards this harmony, of being honest with ourselves, of learning more about ourselves in the first place, and about any potential conflicts, the very process of doing that is already self-actualization. So again, if you start thinking about self-actualization as a process of becoming rather than the destination, that clears up lots of doubts and probably removes lots of pressure as well. Because it seems like, as I was saying, the self-actualization, it's not the goal. There's more. It's just part of the process, part of the journey. How did you choose to become a life coach? Can you keep like this irrelevant question to the end of the live stream? I will be staying a couple minutes longer. So if you want to ask me that, I'm free to. I'll be happy to answer that question later on. If you stop caring entirely about what others think, you might become a nihilistic punk. Well, so in that situation, I'm sorry, I'm going to be very, very direct. So in that situation, there's still no separation between yourself and other people. You still depend on the world to bring you meaning, even if there is lack of meaning. You see what I'm saying? Because when you become a nihilistic punk, right, in a way you don't care about anything at all. You don't care about anything outside of yourself. You are still dependent on the environment for satisfying your needs, perhaps, for belonging to the world in itself. So you are not fully taking the responsibility by saying that, all right, if I separate myself from other people, if I don't care about other people, I will be able to focus on myself. That's not nihilism. Becoming more versatile is the goal for me. Right. Exactly. So being kind of flexible and adaptable, part of the self-actualization process. So I'm thinking for a couple of minutes, as we are talking about potential obstacles to the process of self-actualization, to being motivated, I wonder what sort of obstacles you've been facing in your life in terms of this process. What stops you from orienting yourself towards personal growth? What stops you from maybe choosing your own values for yourself, or living authentically, or being more autonomous in life? Or what kind of prevents you from maybe learning more about yourself, which are all components of that process of growth and process of self-actualization. So I was talking about that the major component, this major obstacle for most people could be maybe unconscious in a way, is that fear. But I think the little exercise that could be very helpful, it's a little bit silly, but it works. Basically, when you ask yourself this question, why am I not choosing growth, or why am I not self-actualizing, or why am I not growing, or why do I fear rejection? If you ask this question of why repeatedly, so for example, you ask yourself, why do I have social anxiety? Your brain will give you an answer. Then ask yourself again, why is that? Why is that? So basically, with this method, you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper within yourself. So you get one answer, then ask yourself, why is that? Then why is that? Then why is that? And you, by this process, you are learning more about yourself. So it's not like all of your answers that your brain will produce are going to be 100% true, because brain can be kind of creative with different thoughts. But eventually you reach more emotional part of you, and that will give you more clues about why certain things happen in your life or not happening in your life. All right, so no comments on obstacles. So I'm assuming that you're all guys actualizing themselves, which is really good. But one more obstacle, as I was talking, so fear of ourselves, of kind of rejection, not being accepted, all that fear leads to defenses. So we get defensive in certain situations. We might avoid certain situations where that fear starts coming up. If it's too much for us, boom, defenses, right? So defenses could be anything: repression, avoidance, right? Denial, intellectualization, anything that could get you away from this anxiety or fear. But also another obstacle to one last obstacle actually on maybe not choosing growth always, or not feeling motivated to grow, are our unmet needs. So basically, in a way, self-neglect or lack of self-care, right? So basically what happens is that when we have an unmet need, right, it's gonna keep bugging us. If it's unconscious, we're gonna find very unhealthy ways to satisfy that need. To give you an example, sorry, I'm spaghetti. So for example, when someone has a bad habit, compulsive bad habit, an addiction maybe, it most likely stems from an unmet need. So again, you need to ask yourself, in the present moment, when you're in the habit, why are you doing it? Right? What is going on? What sort of need does this habit enables you to meet? What sort of need does it satisfy? And that's going to lead you to this idea, oh, this is what I'm getting from this bad habit. This is what I'm getting from this addiction, right? So obviously this is not a very healthy way to satisfy it, and then you have to find a better way for satisfying that need. But obviously all these unmet needs will keep bugging in our unconscious, and it will be difficult to focus on growth. So what are the obstacles? Feeling bad about myself. So something with self-esteem, or something with confidence maybe, or self-efficacy, something like that. Or being too tightly connected to your inner critic, or to superego perhaps. Something along these lines. Probably investigate that feeling bad about yourself. Where is it coming from, and why? Making bold life changes is an obstacle for me. Okay, so changes could push you on this path of growth, could enable you growth and development. But if you're not making changes, maybe you are not growing. It's hard to say from your message. Fear and avoidance. Yep. Addiction can be an obstacle itself. Yep. Because then you are still not getting your need met properly. For example, I used to smoke, and it took me so many attempts to actually quit. But the way I quit it is not by trying to quit, but actually going more and more deeper into the experience. What am I getting from smoking? So I was trying to be more and more present while I was doing it, while I was going out for a cigarette. And that actually provided me with a really good idea on what do I need right now. So basically, it's not about nicotine, it's not about a cigarette, but basically about relaxing and being present. So I switched more and more when I could. Okay, so I want to go for a cigarette, so I'm actually going to stay present, because this is, or relax, because this is what I want. And it kind of worked. Perfectionism. Yes, again, so there is this connection or dependence on maybe our super ego to guide our choices. So in that case, we are still not choosing, but our super ego or the inner critic is choosing. So in this last 15 minutes, perhaps we could move on to actually some strategies, right? So what could we do to tune into this drive? Because as I was saying before, we have this drive within our self. We all have this, perhaps a need for growth or for self-actualization itself, but it might be very hidden by all these social rules or values that we adapted from other people that don't really belong to us. So the first step, actually, my advice would be to know yourself, right? So who you are as a person. And it's a kind of long, it could be a long, could be a short process, but kind of choose it, selecting and analyzing your choices in life, your values, your decisions, and evaluating them in terms of which ones are aligned with yourself. So which ones are really based on your choice, and which ones are actually based on maybe getting approval from other people or meeting some standards of your society or of your community or your family or friends, right? Which one belongs truly to you, right? So which ones you've chosen and which one has been kind of chosen by other people. So this process of learning more about yourself and developing this understanding will also enable you to know more about your defenses, about obstacles, about your fears, right? So obviously in this process you want to be honest with yourself. So it takes lots of self-honesty, self-kindness, compassion, because the things that you might discover about yourself are not going to be very nice. Just a warning. I'm not saying this is the case, but all this process of learning about ourselves can uncover our drives or motivations. When we look at, for example, past events, why did I do that, right? Why did I choose to do that in the first place? And then that kind of gives you an idea of perhaps your fears, about your motivations. So as you kind of know, increasing that self-knowledge, that already enables you to become more autonomous, because then you see values, for example, or your drives that you're not fully agreeing with in the first place. So that will enable you to then shift the focus onto making conscious choices. So for example, if you feel driven to, or inspired or motivated to pick up a specific career in your life, why is that? Where is this motivation coming from? And you need to be very, very honest with yourself. Is it really the career that you want, or is it gonna provide you something from the environment? Is it gonna meet your need? Right? Is it coming from other people? Is it really a good career for you, for yourself? So this kind of processes, this kind of questions, we need to ask ourselves to separate ourselves from other people. And only then we can start developing our autonomy to choose the values and things in our lives that we want, that are right for us, that are good for us. So even if for other people a specific career could seem, super career, like, okay, I'm gonna open a new business, for example, or I'm gonna work in some corporation, pretty good career, right? It will give you lots of social approval. But then you ask yourself, and actually it doesn't make you feel really good about yourself. It's not the experience you want to have. So this sort of questioning, this sort of things that we need to pay attention to. That's how we start developing our autonomy. And then we base our decision, again, as I was saying, what is right for us. It's not about going astray, being selfish, ruining our lives, being impulsive. But it's an act of self-care. Because then as you know yourself, you know what your needs are, then you're choosing to meet your needs in the right way. Not by using people as proxy, for example, not as you using being dependent on the environment. in a sense, but by being dependent on yourself in a sense, right? Where the environment is just something that enables you to meet these needs, because you can learn from other people, you can interact with other people, you can get new opinions, right? And obviously you want to be in harmony with the environment as well, to some extent at least, because where else are you going to actualize your potential? And obviously that doesn't work if you just do it in your head. I'm realizing most of my obstacles are designed to keep myself away from fear of failure and create comfort in a situation I'm not satisfied with. Right. So it's all about creating discomfort in your life and avoidance of fear. So what we want to do, it is scary, is actually go and confront our fear. So whatever we are scared of, that's what we should be moving towards, because our fear is telling us a lot about our defenses. So defenses are basically these obstacles towards this expansion and growth, right? If you're scared of people, for example, if you're scared of public speaking, you're going to be avoiding it, you're going to be avoiding the situations. Sure, you're going to be comfortable, you're not going to experience this anxiety, but you're not going to grow in this area. So yeah, it's a kind of old saying about, it's all about kind of stepping outside of your comfort zone. With more self-knowledge can come more self-judgment and criticism. That is the risk. But would the self-judgment and criticism, would it reflect your choice and autonomy? Do you choose to criticize yourself? Do you choose to judge yourself? Because if you don't, if it's something that just happens in your brain and you have zero part in the decision-making process, that's something to look into, because most likely all this inner critic, and I've made lots of videos on the inner critic already. The inner critic is part of this internalized values from the society. So, for example, how our parents treated us, how peers treated us. So we internalize the external criticisms and we take them as our own, so that we can keep gaining approval and we can avoid being punished or embarrassed or ashamed by other people, or rejected or ostracized. So something to look into. Alright, so choosing ourselves and being honest in the whole process, right? So you won't get much self-understanding if you're not fully honest with yourself. So as I was saying, there's this silly little method of asking yourself repeatedly why something is happening. Why are you thinking that way? Where is it coming from? And eventually you will get more emotional place. So the moment you get more emotional about something, you're hitting closer to the truth. Because the true self, the authentic self, if you want, the core of your being, is this place of harmony between how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're acting ideally. So getting answers that bring in more emotions, more feelings are probably closer to the truth. And in terms of your needs, again, self-knowledge, self-understanding will provide you with more information on how to what is it that you need. And you need to question different activities in your life. So for example, as I was saying, if you have a habit, if you have a bad addiction, what sort of need does it help you to meet, right? And then if you're not happy with it, switch it to a method of more appropriate way of meeting your needs. So in a sense, this whole process is like breaking free from all these chains of values that don't belong to ourselves, fear, right, avoidance, staying in the comfort zone and not doing anything, right? And essentially it's about choosing yourself first, so lots of self-care, knowing yourself and meeting all these needs. At the same time, being mindful of what effect you're having on the environment and what effect the environment has on you. So it's not like you're becoming more and more completely self-centered and completely separated from everything around you, but you become simply more autonomous. So you have more choice as you disentangle yourself from all these values, all these opinions, all these, interpretations or feelings even that don't really belong to you. So it's all about developing this autonomy and going against the current at times, which might be very scary, but that enables you to tune into this drive. And as you are listening more to yourself, right, you need to obviously take some self-trust. As you're listening to that true self that you uncover underneath all this stuff that doesn't belong to you, it's going to be easier to make decisions that are good for you, that are right. And that's how you start growing more and more, start developing more and more. So I hope you guys all found it very helpful. Thank you so much for joining me, and I can stay another couple minutes or so if you have any questions. And one last thing, obviously I forgot to mention, but most of my videos are about actually self-actualization. Most of my videos are breaking down this process onto different steps. The whole goal of this project is to promote this idea of personal growth development from this perspective. So if you guys have any questions, I can still stay here for another couple of minutes and I'm happy to answer them. So there was someone asking me a question before. Was it about why did I become a coach? So I kind of answered it in one of the previous live streams. So originally I wanted to become a therapist, but becoming a coach was a quicker route, obviously. So becoming a therapist is still on the table for me. But I'm taking my time. I'm not fully ready to become a therapist. But why a therapist and why a coach is because I'm very interested in psychology, obviously. I mean, obviously, why would I be putting so much effort into all these videos and all this project? But I'm also interested in something more to the mainstream psychology itself. So I'm really fascinated by Jung's theories, or at least I've been for some time. At least he was a very important figure in my life for a few years, and he was actually the major reason why I chose psychology in the first place, because I got intrigued that there is something more, maybe to my life, to people's life, or to life in general. So I kind of got very, very curious about researching more about these processes that maybe help us grow or help us develop, help us reconnect with this kind of self-actualizing drive. But even from this perspective, I see self-actualization as kind of being more than psychological process of development. But maybe I will make another video on that. Moving from a task-oriented life to a goal-oriented life. Right, so I'm not sure if I understand fully your question, from task-oriented life to a goal-oriented. So do you mean that you could be living a life where everything is a task, a chore, responsibility, a duty? Or you could be living a life where you are driven by your goals? So in terms of moving from one into the other, I would say that it all comes down again to choosing your own values and developing this autonomy. So setting goals for yourself would be a part of this process, because then you start making choices in your life that are good for yourself. So only when you know yourself, obviously to the best of your ability in that moment, that will enable you to start doing things, making decisions in life that are right for you. Thank you, Miko. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mamo. Thank you, Boltzmann's brain. Hope I pronounced that right. Do you think social approval is a healthy or unhealthy thing? Okay, right, last question. Is social approval healthy or unhealthy thing? I think there is a value in it, and there is a purpose why we are doing. So if nobody paid attention to what other people are doing, and I'm just living, we would be just living in our own kind of la la land and doing whatever the hell we want, then there probably would be lots of chaos. So I think this drive for social approval, for getting social approval, for giving social approval, is in a way keeping people together. But at the same time, I think that social approval is a little bit like having training wheels on your bicycle. So it's gonna be very useful to some extent, up to a certain point, until you start being responsible for yourself and for your environment around you. So again, links into this self-actualized state, right? Because when you're on that path of self-actualization, once you reach a certain part of the development, taking responsibility for yourself, taking responsibility for your environment around you in a way, but not in a controlling way, enables you to act, responsibly in a way that doesn't take away other people's rights, in a sense. So you don't need social approval in that case if you are able to reason about what is right and what is wrong, and you are able to be kind of considerate of other people. So again, it links into this expansion. So social approval is not responsibility. Social approval is the controlling way. So when you giving away approval, when you judge other people, when you say, I don't like this, I like that, or that person shouldn't be doing that, it's control. It's actually being controlling towards other people. And then when you depend on receiving social approval, you are being controlled by others, in a sense. You're giving away your power. So I would say, yes, social approval is needed up to a certain point, but once you reach a level where you are able to, be aware of other people, be considerate, in a sense, be understanding of what is happening. So again, you have to be able to separate yourself to some extent. Then you're able to take, responsibility for yourself, to some extent for other people, or rather for the effect you might be having on others. But it's not control. So at that point, you will not really depend on social approvals. All right, guys. So can't see any more questions. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. Since I've changed from Saturdays to Friday, I've noticed that you guys are very, very quiet than the previous people I was getting. Although I can see that some people are the same from Saturdays. So have to get used to that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope to see you next Friday again, same time. Take care of yourself. Bye.